Thank you very much. This paper delves with natural sanctuaries in southern Etruria, Italy, and their gradual transformation during the course of the Bronze Age. Caves, mountains, rivers, and lakes have been undoubtedly among the most studied natural features in pre- and proto-history. Investigating their use and meaning, the very majority of these places have been interpreted as sacred spaces or sanctuaries. These sites are often located far from the inhabited areas, speaking about southern Etruria, suggesting the possible function as meeting spaces for all those surrounding communities. And these groups would have made pilgrimages, possibly, from their villages towards the aforementioned natural sanctuaries at certain times of the year, gathering to share communal cultic practices and ceremonies. The sanctuary would have been, therefore, a meeting place, a liminal area for cultural exchanges and trade. Today we'll focus on the River Fiora Valley, between the provinces of Grosseto in Tuscany and Viterbo in northern Lazio, contained by the Mount Miata and the Tyrrhenian Sea. This area, morphologically and culturally homogeneous, is rich in archaeological evidence which suggests the presence of a ritual landscape. The first element characterizing this ritual landscape is represented by the multitude of natural cavities with evidence of human occupation testified along the entire course of the River Fiora in pre- and proto-history. Recently, a member of our team, my colleague Christian Metta, completed his doctoral research on the attendance of the caves in Maremma Tosco-Laziale between the Copper Age and the Bronze Age, with a topographic, functional analysis and typological study of the archaeological finds. In the travertine formations typical of these areas, numerous caves have been identified showing archaeological evidence of rituals and burials. These caves were probably seen as the access to the underworld, where agricultural products and ritual meals were offered to the chthonic deities. Their use reaches a peak between the end of the early Bronze Age and the initial phase of the Middle Bronze Age. However, in some cases, an earlier occupation has been attested, such as in the case of Grotta di Sette Cannelle, used in the Upper Paleolithic, since the Upper Paleolithic and in the Neolithic, and Grotta di Carli, occupied since the Neolithic. The natural cavities examined here are karstic. They fall mainly in the travertine and present different shapes and planimetries, which allow to distinguish them in caves, shelters, horizontal galleries, descending and presenting multiple alleys. The most abundant are, on one hand, those ones presenting a longitudinal planimetrically development, characterized by a main gallery with multiple secondary alleys, such as Grotta Nuova, Grotta Misa, Grotta dell'Infernetto, Grotta Don Simone. And on the other, those ones characterized by a single large room, such as in the case of Grotta delle Sette Cannelle e Grotta della Paternale. In only one case, Grotta di Carli, a single main room has been found connected with a secondary room located at a lower level, a descendant gallery. Rock shelters such as Ponte della Badia and Le Bagnare can be included in this group. The only cavity which develops vertically is Felcetone, a natural chasm originated in the travertine. The natural cavities found in this area have been excavated by the water, and therefore they're directly connected with this element. Among these, it is possible to distinguish between absorbent cavities, occasionally crossed by temporary water flows, perpetually active cavities, characterized by constant running waters or lakes, and neutral cavities without any hydrogeological function, with both a vertical or horizontal structure. When considering the hydrogeological activity which characterizes each cavity, it has been observed that the areas most used are those ones without running waters or with absorbent waters. Caves characterized by internal streams and lakes show the material evidence of mainly ritual and funerary use. The study of the relationship between the geomorphology of the natural features and the anthropic elements found in each context allowed us to identify a certain repetitiveness in the type of use evidenced in similar structures. Christian identified a funerary use when human remains are recovered, even in the case of a single individual. Generally, they present a very simple shape: a cave, a gallery, or a chasm. Cultic use, particular objects, associations, unusual animal and vegetal deposits, vessels occasionally placed upside down, intentional fragmentation. We observed how the natural cavities used for ritual purposes all present recurrent morphological and structural characteristics. They're all galleries, simple or multiple, with a varying number of internal rooms, halls, and sometimes characterized by the presence of seasonal or perennial hypogeic waters. The dwelling use identified in cavities, when those ones are intended as occasional or seasonal shelters. The archaeological record is characterized by domestic pottery and lithics, a few animal remains, the majority of which are domesticated individuals. These cavities are characterized by easy access, large rooms with a flat floor. Occasionally, funerary and cultic use might overlap or occur in succession to one another in different times. For this reason, within the context classification, we consider the primary use that one testified for a longer period. The cavities with a gallery characterized by multiple secondary tunnels are generally connected to a cultic use, such as Grotta Nuova and Grotta dell'Infernetto. In this context, offers and or animal vegetal depositions, objects intentionally fragmented, and small earths have been found. Grotta Nuova is one of the main examples of natural epogeism connected with cultic practices. It presents a long and narrow corridor crossed by an underground perennial stream, on the sides of which earth's charred seeds and animal remains were recovered. The following archaeological evidence can be considered as indicators of rituality. So integral vessels were found, placed in the water or on the side of the stream, sometimes containing or covering charred seeds, charcoal, bones, possibly material evidence of offerings or ritual meals, miniature pottery, concentration of objects in a niche artificially modified with the addition of a small dry stone wall. Grotta dell'Infernetto, called Il Bucone by the local speleologists, is similar to Grotta Nuova when considering geomorphology and archaeological remains. Traditionally, it is considered connected with Grotta Nuova, but this has never been confirmed by speleological surveys. Here, a vast quantity of archaeological materials has been recovered, mostly ceramic, dated to the early and initial Middle Bronze Age. Bone artifacts, flint, animal and vegetal remains, mainly goat, pig, pygmy cattle, dog, and deer. An interesting ceramic anthropomorphic figurine. And then on the frontal surface of this figurine, I don't know if you can see it, you might see a stylized face and the indication of shoulders and a large deep cavity, possibly interpretable as the umbilicus. The rear surface lacks of any specific features. The presence of vegetal and animal remains and the anthropomorphic figurine might suggest the practice of rituals dedicated to secure a good harvest and preserve the livestock, possibly dedicated to chthonic deities. Chasms and descending galleries have been mainly used for funerary purposes, as attested by intentional human remains depositions, Grotta di Carli and Felcetone. This type of use is attested in southern Tuscany, as in the case of Sassi Neri, Punta degli Stretti, Buca di Spaccasasso, and Le Galleraie. In the case of Grotta Misa and Grotta Don Simone, the multiple tunneled galleries which presented ritual depositions, such as sacred meals and or other offerings, were also found containing human remains belonging to one or more individuals in secondary deposition, suggesting therefore also a funerary use or a sort of ancestry cult. The conjunction of rituals and human remains might indicate some sort, as I was saying, of cult towards the ancestors, as also testified at Grotta di Sette Cannelle during the Neolithic. Cavities characterized by a single large room, a cavern, or by a rock shelter are generally connected to dwelling use. Occasional or seasonal, as testified in the case of Grotta del Paternale, Ponte dell'Abbadia, Le Bagnare, Grotta dello Sbirro, where fragments of large vessels such as dolia and numerous animal remains have been found. Domestic activities connected to food processing, meat and fish, or agropastoral activities, the production of butter or cereals processing, might have taken place in these structures, which could have been used due to their favorable microclimate, also as occasional dwelling during the hunting season. The concentration in the same geographical district of cavities utilized as burial sites or places of worship, in some cases used since the Neolithic to the Bronze Age, characterizes this area as a series of ritual landmarks. It could be hypothesized that this was perceived as a vast sacred space, a ceremonial landscape, a pilgrimage destination possibly for the surrounding communities who all belong to the same culture. Similar concentrations of natural cavities are attested in the entire peninsula. In central southern Tuscany are mainly located within the Colline Metallifere, the so-called metalliferous hills, Mount Argentario and Mount Cetona. Speaking about mounds, another important element of the ceremonial landscape is represented by mountain peaks, often connected to natural cavities. And an emblematic case is the district of the Mount Miata, where various evidence of rituality has been identified, especially in its southern slopes. The first example we would like to mention is Poggio alla Sassaiola, where a chasm characterized by a rich archaeological stratification was found. This is a natural cleft originated in the calcareous bedrock, found accidentally due to some quarry works, which uncovered a rich anthropic deposit. A survey was also carried out in the area surrounding the cleft, not yet compromised by the quarry, located at about 1,000 meters above sea level, and two large natural ditches, possibly artificially regularized, were found in connection with pottery and bones. Its isolated position and its shape due to a cast sinkhole, its peculiar internal stratification are all elements of which support a ritual identification for this feature. Mind that the stratification you see here is characterized by the alternation of well-defined depositional levels containing ash and charcoal and a rich abundance of archaeological material. The archaeological deposit contained various artifacts, including fine pottery, bowls and carinated cups, miniature vessels, bone and shell objects, such as owls, knives, necklace beads, stone lithics, faience, ember beads, flint arrowheads, abundant and animal fragmentary bones, many of which were burned, and even charred seeds. Miniature vessels, considered here as one of the main ritual indicators, find many comparisons from the same geochronological context, such as the case of Mount Cetona and the surrounding area, where this type of artifacts have been found in a series of caves interpreted as ritual spaces. Another interesting case is Mount Labro, at about 1,200 meters above sea level, to the southwest of Mount Miata. Pottery dated to the early Bronze Age have been found during a survey and might be connected to the use of the site in connection with a series of natural chasms found on the southern slope of the mount, which, however, were not systematically investigated. One of these chasms, one of these cavities, was later transformed at the middle of, in the half of 19th century, in a worship space with and an ancient poetry, which I didn't translate here, you can see it in Italian, an ancient poetry dedicated to this place, created by Davide Lazzaretti, a sort of hermit who created a religious movement here. The poetry mentions that when the cavity was rearranged, as you can see here, the remains of an ancient man with a sword were found. So possibly we can think about a possible ancient tomb. And a direct comparison of this sort of situation, this sort of context, is certainly Mount Setona, which can be considered as a nodal point between Val di Chiana and Val d'Orcia, specifically between the river routes which run parallel to the Pennines towards south and north in Val Tiberina and Val d'Arno, and the routes towards the Tyrrhenian Sea. As part of this suggested landscape, we would like to mention also the Biancheto, which is a vast travertine cliff to the middle of Cetona's slope, clearly visible from long distances. These features can be certainly identified as landmarks of the Val di Chiana landscape and include the series of natural cavities found at Belverde of Cetona and characterized by ritual use. These places would have represented liminal areas, fostering the circulation of material and immaterial culture between different communities. Another important natural feature which acquired ritual importance in the Bronze Age is in southern Etruria. It is water, and in its different forms, such as rivers, ponds, lakes, springs. An example here is Lake Mezzano, located in the volcanic formation of Latera. Here, remains of stilt houses have been identified, so a settlement was found, as well as depositions of integral vessels and metal artifacts date between the early and the recent Bronze Age. Offerings of prestigious objects have been found underwater, such as this pin with a disc-shaped head, uncommon and rare in this area, and probably of northern origin, possibly a prestigious gift. And these two swords, type Arco and Canegrate, which the metallographic analysis evidenced as non-functional or unfinished. They haven't been annealed, basically. They're soft, they cannot be used. And possibly they could be intended as offerings to the lake, according to a ritual model well known in this period for northern contexts, such as Gewasserfunde. A small silver spiral ornament, possibly a earring, was also found inside a biconical decorated vessel on the bottom of the lake. As seen up to now, the natural sanctuaries identified for the early and middle Bronze Age in this area do not show any trace of artificial structures or anthropic modifications, excluding the presence of herds. During the late Bronze Age in southern Etruria, it is possible to observe a gradual artificial transformation of the sacred space, and in some cases the emergence of completely human-made constructions to host rituals and possibly worship. The first example of this type of practice that we would like to mention is Mount Cimino, the highest mountain in Tuscia, at about 1,000 meters above sea level. Excavations by Roma La Sapienza University and the Superintendency for Southern Etruria Archaeological Heritage uncovered an imposing terraced stepped structure supported by a series of buttresses lining onto 4 large blocks of trachyte, which have been partially artificially shaped and arranged in what is today visible as an arched shape. Possibly this shape looks like an arch, but it might be part of a larger, maybe more curvilinear and more complete structure. Contained by this structure, a deep stratification of levels of ashes containing abundant archaeological material, alternating to reddish sterile soil deposits, similar to what we saw already for Poggio della Sassaiola, was found. Among the finds, unusual and fine objects were found, such as decorated pottery, mainly cups, and even a rare zoomorphic vessel. Differently from Poggio della Sassaiola, which, as we already mentioned, stands isolated on a peak far away from settlements, this imposing artificial structure has been constructed on what we could define as the acropolis of a wider settlement, surrounded by a fortified wall, testifying the importance of the site. Another particular structure has been found in the Fiora Valley at the site of L'Esparne di Poggiobuco, where a mound made of stone blocks, artificially arranged, has been constructed to form a completely artificial acropolis for the wider settlement. Acropolis A. All this formation is completely artificial and human-made. At the top of this artificial peak, artificial mound, offerings and ritual depositions of clay figurines, miniature vessels, metal artifacts, ivory objects, and bone were recorded. As the most relevant case study for this new practice of constructed sacred space in southern Etruria, we would like to present the late Bronze Age settlement of Sergente de La Nova, which has been regularly excavated since the 1970s under the direction of Ferrante Ritatore von Villers first, and Nuccio Negroni Catacchio and our team afterwards. Sergente de La Nova is a natural tufaceous cliff which has been slowly carved by the action of minor streams, creating sort of canyons that naturally detach the cliff from the other confining plateaus. Among a series of ritual contexts identified at this site, two hypogeic structures have been artificially dug into the bedrock and present evidence of ritual activity. The complex of cave 10 and 11 consists of two overlapping rooms artificially excavated in the tuff, located on the northern slope of Sergente de La Nova, on one of the artificial terraces investigated and now known as Sector 3. You can see the dwellings and a series of artificially excavated structures, which are could be functional, as you see ovens here, maybe other caves used for storage. But here, cave 10 and 11 are a little bit unusual in their shape, as we will see. They, both those two caves are connected by a hole cut on the floor in front of the entrance of the upper cave 10, almost completely occupied. Cave 10 floor is almost completely occupied by a large hearth. Surprisingly, an Iron Age, as you can see here, the fire area, the hearth. Surprisingly, in an Iron Age fibula has been found placed on the abandonment levels of the structures, as if it has been visited centuries later its construction. while speaking about ceramic material, we don't have a very abundance of objects, clay objects, and pottery. This context doesn't really present, in terms of pottery, any peculiarity. It's all the few objects found are all domestics. However, a consistent amount of animal bones was found. These were discovered, well, 975 fragments of bones were not interpreted. It was not possible to identify them. However, 444 could be identified. But as you can see here, the vast majority of the identified bones do belong to pigs, and the vast majority of the individuals found at the cave were newborn individuals or piglets. So the underground room, Cave 11, connected to an upper structure, which is Cave 10, characterized by this large earth, probably used to prepare communal meals. And the preponderance of pig bones present more than punctual traits comparable with the much later cult of Demeter Thesmophoros, also characterized by the sacrifice of piglets and the use of bothroi, the use of holy wells. So another artificial hypogeic structure found at Sergente de La Nova is Cave 7, found in Sector 4. This consists of a main frontal room, at the bottom of which a large subcircular niche was found. The two rooms were separated by some sort of screen made of organic material, possibly wattle and daub, into which an opening was left where a hearth was located. At the center of the main frontal room, a more structured fireplace was found, made with a large rectangular baked clay plastron. A very unusual find in this cave supports further the ritual interpretation of this structure. The fragment of a human skull cap was found in a small pit bordered by a series of stones, and it was found here at the center of the room. This is quite unexpected, considering that the main funerary ritual in this period in southern Etruria is cremation. On the floor of the main room, a series of pits were excavated in various shapes and dimensions, the majority of which has been found containing spindle whorls, reels, and pestles. Particular is also the location of the aforementioned hearth, located in the passage between the rooms, almost demarking the act of moving from one room to the other one, more secluded. This is clearly not functional in case of a dwelling use of the structure. On the right side of this passage hearth, the skull of a young bovine was found. Inside the niche, other traces of possible ritual activities have been found, such as the presence of a large ground stone and the remains of a juvenile pig. And I apologize because the PowerPoint is not behaving as it should. So each sector, which has been fully explored up to now at Sergente de La Nova and represent a homogeneous block of dwellings, seems to present at least one artificial cave sanctuaries. So both the structures we saw, they have both been artificially excavated into the bedrock in the shape of a natural cave. The examples presented so far seem to indicate that in late Bronze Age southern Etruria, the places recognized as sanctuaries are not anymore confined and isolated far from the main settlements, corresponding to specific natural features such as natural cavities, mountains, and lakes. These features are now transported and recreated artificially within the settlements, imitating, miming somehow their natural counterparts, originating what we called the natural mimesis phenomenon. We could argue that the early and middle Bronze Age practice of pilgrimages to the natural sanctuaries, shared by many different communities and probably used also as a meeting place for material and immaterial cultural exchange, is now maybe transported as well in the settlements in the form of possibly procession to the sacred structures built as the house of the deities or towards the related rituals and ceremonies. With the advent of the Iron Age, on one hand, we assist to the persistence, to a certain level, of this phenomenon, such as in the case of Banditella, near Vulci, where a natural spring used since the Middle Bronze Age has been rectified and transformed in an artificial pond for systematic offerings of miniature vessels and prestigious items. But on the other hand, for the first time, the house of gods and goddesses is now constructed with the same shape of that one used by humans, and the first sanctuary huts are constructed. These are usually found under the later developments of sacred complexes, such as the cases of Tarquinia, Satricum, Cerveteri Sant'Antonio, Portonaccio in Veio. And to conclude, I just reported a series of points which we thought were important to our discussion. So we saw how natural features such as cavities, mountains, rivers, and lakes were places of worship and ritual use in southern Etruria during the early and the middle Bronze Age. These natural sanctuaries are usually far away from the settlements. They are isolated, but they all show homogeneity when it comes to the material culture recovered from their archaeological contexts. So they are probably attended by communities who somehow identify themselves and share some communal material culture. The natural sanctuaries are clearly landmarks. They are very visible, caves such as caves and peaks, and delineate the Fiora Valley as a characteristic ceremonial landscape, a route which connects somehow through the river Fiora, the Mount Miata's complex, and the Tyrrhenian Sea. These led to hypothesize the existence of pilgrimages practices, which put in contact different communities who share ritual identities and possibly took the opportunity of pilgrimage, as Elena was mentioning before, for material and immaterial cultural exchange. Some of these sites present a characteristic alternating stratigraphy, which indicates a regular, periodic, possibly seasonal attendance to the place. We wondered if maybe we could speak about specific pilgrimage seasons. In the late Bronze Age, we assist to the appearance in southern Etruria of the natural mimesis phenomenon. Natural sanctuaries attended in the early and middle Bronze Age are taken now as models to recreate artificial sacred spaces within the settlements. We've seen the artificial mounds, the artificial peaks, the artificial caves of Sergente de La Nova. We possibly can see a shift for pilgrimage to processions internal to each settlement or community. Is this maybe the reflection of a socio-political change? Is it maybe not safe anymore to carry out, to make pilgrimages in visiting all these sacred spaces, caves and peaks? And therefore, the holy spaces, the sacred spaces, had to be transported within the security, the safety of the settlement. It's important to remind that settlements in late Bronze Age southern Etruria are now always fortified. So this might suggest some sort of considerations about this. And I am finished. Thank you.